Hello, English 9 students. Let's take a look at some background information for Animal Farm, written by George Orwell. So there's a quote here from the novel or the novella. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So I just want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. How can someone be more equal than someone else? Doesn't that mean they're better than someone else? It's kind of an intriguing idea. And I just mentioned that Animal Farm is a novella, which means it's longer than a short story, but it's shorter than a novel. So usually a novella is defined as a text that's between 50 and 100 pages. And Animal Farm is very, very short. It's only 10 chapters. And depending on the publication that you read, it's roughly 100 pages or so. So we know that this story takes place on a farm, and the animals are going to try and overthrow the farmer. So this is your learning target for today. I can review background information and terminology for Animal Farm. So this text was written by George Orwell. He was a British author and journalist, but his legal name was actually Eric Blair. That was the name that he was given when he was born. And he did not publish his books under that name because he felt like it was too standoffish. He felt like it was a little too uptight, and he wanted his name to appeal to people, and he didn't want them to not read his works just based on the name that he was given. So he felt like his given name, Eric Blair, was too snobbish and upper class. Surprisingly, even though George Orwell was British, he was born in India. So he was born in 1903 and passed in 1950. At that time, India was part of the British Empire, so that's why he's considered British. So he was not born to a wealthy family. They did not own any property, and there was no property passed down to him. He was best known for Animal Farm in 1984, and he had the reputation for being an outsider. He liked to oppose the crowd, and he was also skeptical about the intentions of governments. And so he tried to bring those um, faults to light in some of his works. As an adult, he also worked for the Imperial Police in British occupied India. There's a few pictures that represent Animal Farm. You can see that quote that was on the first slide here. So there's some interesting images here. You can see in some of these, the animals are wearing clothing. In some of these pictures, the animals are not. And in a lot of these pictures, one animal that you see over and over again are pigs. So the pigs are going to play an important role in the story. And then one color that you'll notice that appears in almost all of these pictures is the color red. So think about what that means. That's intentional. See if you can make a connection to that. Here's a quote by George Orwell. If people cannot write well, they cannot think well. And if they cannot think well, others will do their thinking for them. George Orwell. So we'll see this quote kind of tie in with the story itself once we start reading. So why animals? Why did he choose animals as his characters? Why not just write about people? So in explaining how he came to write Animal Farm, Orwell said he once saw a little boy whipping a horse, and later he wrote, "It struck me that if only such animals became aware of their strength, we should have no power over them, and that men exploit animals in much the same way as the rich exploit the worker." So this moment in his life really stood out to George Orwell, and it kind of inspired or helped him start writing this story, Animal Farm. The fact that animals like this horse is so much stronger and more powerful than this little boy whipping it, and yet the boy had the power. Also, when this book was published in 1945, booksellers put it on in the children's section because the characters were animals, but this is not a children's book by any means. And you'll see what I mean by that once we start reading. So here's a few important terms for Animal Farm. Some of these have come up briefly already, and we'll revisit them throughout the text as well. So communism is the common and public ownership, not private ownership, but public ownership. All members of the working class own everything and share wealth equally. So, no matter what job you have, whether you're a garbage collector, whether you're a doctor, um, everyone essentially owns everything and makes the same amount of money, despite what you do, or even if you do nothing at all. So, there's definitely some problems with that system. Um, and it's a very easy system to go corrupted. Animal Farm is what we consider a fable. So, that is a short story with talking animals that teaches a lesson. And we mentioned earlier this week that it is an allegory, so a story that uses symbols and objects to deliver a message about a real world experience. So, in Animal Farm, the author is making a statement about politics and government. So, all the characters in the story, the farmer, the animals, everybody represents a figure from history, and the events in the story represent actual historical events. So, we're not going to go over those before we start reading. I think it's kind of confusing when you don't know who the characters in the story are. But as we read, and especially towards the end of the novella, once you have a firm understanding of who the characters are, then we'll start to make some of those historical connections. Finally, the story is also a satire. So that's where we use humor and exaggeration to expose and criticize people's stupidity. So a lot of times we see this in political cartoons, right? Politicians are easy targets for satire, and we'll see a political cartoon that's using humor to exaggerate a person's flaw, essentially. So we'll definitely see that in Animal Farm as well. So why is this text important for us to read today? Why are we still reading this if it was written in 1984? Well, Animal Farm deserves our attention because it will always have lessons to teach us about the ways that people abuse power and manipulate others. There's still tyranny and corruption in our world today. And this is at all kinds of levels, right? This can be at political levels that impact lots of people. These can be at local levels. These um, things can happen just among groups of friends. So we are trying to read this text in order to learn from the mistakes of the past and prevent the abuse of power and the manipulation of others in the future. All right, thank you guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and we will be diving into the story soon.